All right, today we are judging some books by their titles, not their covers, their titles. And I think that the title can be as important as the cover in how you grab the book off the shelf and what you decide to read. Um, Obviously, the content of the book itself is where the story is, and that's the real meat, and that's really what you should judge things off of. But if you're at the bookstore and there's a ton of options, having a good title, having a good cover, I think are both legs up on the competition and ways for authors to get more eyes on their products, more readers in their pages. Um, and I think a lot can be done with a really good title. So some of these I've read, some of these I've not read. I've got 25 books here. We're going to rank them S through F. My kind of three main criteria are: is it a unique title? Does it make me think? And is it cool? So try to hit those three, separate the books out through the tiers, and go through it with that. So starting off, Assassin's Apprentice. This is by Robin Hobb. I've not read this book, so I don't have any knowledge on what the book is. I don't think the title's that good, for the simple fact that it it doesn't really say a whole lot. An assassin and apprentice. It's almost too simple. It does tell me what the book is about, which is good, but it has alliteration. I think it's not terrible, but it's just not that exciting. It's not that cool. It's not that unique, and it's not that evocative. Um, Assassin's Apprentice. We're gonna put it in C, just below middle. Next, we have The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. This is, I think, is not that exciting. A black prism, sure, that's an interesting thought. And I don't know much about this story. I think this is probably in the same vein as Assassin's Apprentice. We're going to put this right there in C tier. Next, we have Beowulf by writer unknown. This is a classic, very old story. Possibly like the first fantasy story or the first story told. It's pretty old. I remember reading it in middle school or high school. I think it's good. I like single title stories, single title names of books, single name titles. Beowulf, again, it's a classic. Removing that from it, is it cool? It is cool. It's a cool name. Is it evocative? Not really. It doesn't really make you think that much. It's just the name of the book, the name of the character in the book. And is it unique? It is unique, I guess. I don't think I mean, I like it because I think that it's old and cool. But if I'm following to my criteria, no, it sort of fails. But I do think it's a little bit more exciting than these two. The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I do think this one's very good. It's simple. It's, I'm looking at the cover here on my screen, and so maybe that's manipulating my thoughts a little bit. The Blade Itself, yeah, it's probably A tier. It's asking a question about the story. It's simple. It's clever. I think it's unique. It's kind of cool. The blade itself. It sounds cool. It sounds sort of archaic. Next, we have The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. I didn't mention it. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I really wanted to do first novels of a series. And so, I've got Lord of the Rings on here. I've got The Fellowship of the Ring. I've got Eye of the World, which is the Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. So we're trying to do that. So Color Magic. There's other better titles, I think, from Terry Pratchett's catalog, from the Discworld stories. But this is kind of the first where things kick off. I actually have not read this one. I think it's okay. I like the fact that it's adding a visual element to magic. I think it's probably B. It's nothing that exciting, but it's not bad. Court of Thorns and Roses. So this is Sarah J. Maas, or Mass. Very, very successful book. Very prolific author. She's written a lot. And this one I've not read. It's a romantasy book. Not that that's a reason why I haven't read it, although it sort of is. I just haven't got to it, and I don't know if I will. But I don't love it, and I mainly don't love it because I don't think it's very unique, and in the sense that I think it steals from George R. R. Martin's A Game of Thrones, and it's that this thing, A Game of Thrones, Winds of Winter, if that ever comes out, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Now, The Court of Thorns and Roses might have a lot of impact on the story. However, I would say that roses have thorns, so it's sort of redundant. I just don't like it. I think it's bad. I think it's a D tier because I think it's kind of stealing, and it just isn't that exciting. Next, we have Eragon by Christopher Paolini. Now, he was very young. He was a young boy when he wrote this, but I think it's bad for a couple different reasons. I like the fact that it's one word, so it has that Beowulf edge to it. But I don't like the fact that it's a blatant ripoff of Aragorn, the character from Lord of the Rings. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe the author would say, hey, that's not true. I just thought of this myself. I have never even read Lord of the Rings. I don't think that's what he would say, but I don't think it's that good. I don't think it's very simple. I don't think it's very simple. I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's unique. I don't think it's cool. It makes you think because in the sense that it is a character's name, and so you're not going to forget that character. So it has that benefit. However, the cover is a dragon, and the dragon is not named Eragon. So that's also a negative. Now, that's digging into the pages a little bit, looking beyond just the surface, breaking the rules a little bit. But I think it's bad. I don't know that it's abysmal. I don't think it's F tier, but I think it's D. I think it's right there with Court of Thorns and Roses. Next, we have The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. This, I think, is incredible. I've read this one. I've read the first 3 or 4 of the series. I had all 14 of them at one point. I don't anymore. But I think The Eye of the World, I think this is probably the best of all of them from what I can remember. I don't remember why this is so important to the series, why The Eye of the World, that phrase, that title is, I don't remember why it's impactful. But I think this is a very, very fantastic title. It asks a lot. It tells you right away that it's fantasy. So that's really good. The eye of the world, we understand what eyes are. We understand what worlds are. And for something to be the eye of the world, are you thinking colossal size, an eyeball the size of the world? Are you thinking a thing that sees all? It just adds questions. It's unique. I mean, it is the this of that thing. So, A Game of Thrones, The Eye of the World. I'm sort of breaking my rule again, but this one just sounds cool. So this one is in S tier. And again, rules are there for when things are dumb and bad. And tropes, you say, oh, that's a trope. You say that when it's a bad thing. But when it's cool, it's like, oh, they took this really, common idea, and you kind of throw that trope word away. So I think Eye of the World is S. It's just fantastic. Next, we have Fellowship of the Ring, the first of the Lord of the Rings. Now, I know that purists will say the actual title of the whole series is The Lord of the Rings. It's not meant to be split up into 3 books. The publishers made him do it. Yes, I am aware. However, in the common zeitgeist, the broad understanding that most everybody has, it's 3 books: Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, Return of the King. I'm going to do it that way, mainly because I think The Fellowship of the Ring is unique and interesting, and I do think Lord of the Rings is good as well. Which again, it is that the this of the that thing. But The Fellowship of the Ring, which I guess is also, it follows that same convention. I think this is very unique. Having the word fellowship, it tells you exactly what happens. They make the fellowship. That's kind of important focal point of book one, getting the ring out of the Shire. Now, I'm not trying to use that as justification for why I think this is a good title, but Fellowship of the Ring, I think it's A tier. I don't think it's as good as Eye of the World, but I could maybe be convinced. No, we're gonna go there. Just as a title alone, it's a very, very good book, obviously. But there. So next we have The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson himself. The absolute writing machine. Mistborn, book one. Now, I might be wrong on my history here, but I thought that when this book first came out, it was just called Mistborn. And then as the series went on and as the eras were developed, it was rechanged in subsequent printings to be called The Final Empire. And I believe book two is Well of Ascension or something. Maybe that's book three. I think Final Empire is terrible. I think it's a terrible title. It's maybe the worst title of all of his books. It doesn't tell you anything. It could be any fantasy series. It tells you that it's a fantasy series, but it also might not be. It could be a historical biography of a general or something. I mean, it's so bad. I just think it's so bad. Mistborn, I think, is fantastic, and maybe that's part of the problem is that you look at this cover and you see Mistborn and you see Final Empire, and it's just like the dichotomy between an incredible name that's two. I love when there's a blend, a word and a word stuck together, and it becomes a new word. Mistborn. That's really cool. That's unique. The Final Empire doesn't mean anything. It's like The Last Jedi. It's on the surface, you go, oh, that's interesting. It's sort of double meaning, and that I think double meanings are cool when you have them in book titles, but not in this sense because it's just too broad. It's too vague. I think it's terrible. I think there's a number of better options for this book. It's bad. The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Now, it's not The Fourth Wing, it's just Fourth Wing. I think this was actually pretty decent. I've only read I listened to the first 30 minutes of this book, so I don't have that much knowledge on why Fourth Wing is important as a title, which is good. Keeps me a little more unbiased. But it's about dragons. I know that. It's about a dragon college and a woman named Violet Sorrengail, which I think is a terrible name. Sorrengail. It's lame. But Fourth Wing, it's a division of the college. It's wing as in there's dragons. Fourth maybe has something else to do with things. So it's got some multiple meanings potentially. It's very simple. It's a memorable Fourth Wing. I think it's pretty good. It would feel like an abomination to put it with these guys up here. So we'll stick it in B because I think it's pretty good, but I don't think it's necessarily A. Maybe these guys are better. But next we have A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin. Now, what I said about Sarah J. Maas, Court of Thorns and Roses, and how it feels very similar to A Game of Thrones. I think Game of Thrones is actually pretty good, and I'm viewing it as the first to do it kind of that way. A Game of Thrones, because the Fellowship of the Ring, the Eye of the World, those are thes, and so changes it a little bit, which is I don't know why it changes it, but it's interesting that you look at it differently that way. A Game of Thrones, it sounds cool, so it's got that going for it. It doesn't necessarily ask that many questions, although it kind of does. A Game of Thrones, and as far as I know, it was unique at the time. So I think it's good. I'm going to put it in A tier. Next, we have Stephen Eriksen's Gardens of the Moon. This I think is really good. I think this is really, really good, and I think it's cool because it's got a bit of a paradox. It's got a bit of a paradox in it. So the moon, what is the moon? It's a big rock that's dead. Having gardens on the rock. I think Malazan, Book of the Fallen, is a terrible title. Terrible. That's too strong. I think it's a hard title to remember because it's hard to pronounce, and I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. I've read Gardens of the Moon. I liked it tremendously. I thought it was really good, but I don't think the title of the series is great. But I do think the title of this book is fantastic. So to me, this is another S tier. The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I hope I pronounced that properly. The first book of the Witcher series, basically. This is actually a fun book. I read it, or I listened to it while I was working, so doing other things, but very, very interesting. Very simple, just an easy, fun read. Little vignette stories. I think the title is bad though. The Last Wish. It's in the same vein as the Final Empire for me. I think it's not good. It's an F tier. It just doesn't say anything. And I know that it's important to the story. I haven't read the story, but removing that, it's like it's The Last Wish. It's so boring. Next, we have Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This I think is fantastic. It's got alliteration, which I know. So does Robin Hobb, and I didn't give it to her for that. But I think Assassin's Apprentice is boring. Lies of Locke Lamora I think is very cool. Locke Lamora. So obviously we have the character. That's good. Character in the title. It tells you. It reminds you of what the book is about, who the book is about. Alliteration in the character's name is very good. Lies of the character, that's good. Is it a narrator that we can't trust? Is it a thief or a rogue type character? It just asks some questions. It's cool. It's unique. It's memorable because of the alliteration. Our brains just work that way. I think it's really good. I think it's S tier. Next, we have Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. So technically, the title is The Lightning Thief, but I think that this follows the Harry Potter naming convention, which obviously I have that on the list. But I think this one is. I think The Lightning Thief itself is cool. I think the Percy Jackson and Olympians part is lame. So based off just the Lightning Thief, and I think you know that it's a book about Greek mythology. The Lightning Thief, it makes you think of Zeus. So there's some evocative sense there. It's not that unique, especially if you add in the Percy Jackson and you compare it to the Harry Potter. It's pretty ununique and pretty repetitive or copying or whatever. I don't know. I think it's fine. I think it's probably C. It's nothing special. Next, we have Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, when I read this book a number of years ago, around its release, I thought it was fantastic and incredible. I read the second book. I did not like the second book. And then 11 years went by, or however long it's been. And I've become annoyed with the series because I don't think it's going to get finished. And I realize that there's a lot of other reasons and things that he's working on, and just personal reasons why we haven't gotten the series. And so I'm not like, up in arms about it, but I just am annoyed that we're probably not going to get the end of it. And so that taints my view of the book. However, trying to look at it objectively, the Name of the Wind, I think it's cool. I think it hits that thing because the wind it's something that you can't even chase. It's, that's a saying, it's like chasing, that's like chasing the wind. It's like spitting in the wind. It's just spitting in the wind and chasing the wind are two different things. But the wind is this force that we feel. We can't see it. We can see its action. We can see its, how it reacts with things. So it's cool in that sense. And then naming it is cool. And so I think as simple as it is, and it is impactful to the story, but as simple as it is, and as potentially annoying as this is for me, I do think it's a pretty good name. So I think it's going to go on A tier. Next, we have the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. This is the Narnia series. Now, this is the first one that he released. It's not the first in the series in order. That would be The Magician's Nephew, which I think is a good title. But I wanted to go with this one because this is when you think of Narnia, you think of this one. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think this is good. It's got borderline alliteration, and I know it doesn't have any alliteration at all, but for some reason it just sounds like it does. And maybe it's the Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe. It has three things versus just the Fellowship of the Ring, or the Lightning Thief. That's one thing. It has Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It tells you exactly what it is. It's very simple. It's unique enough. It's going to go in B. I also think Narnia is a great name because it's easy to read. It's easy to pronounce. I think that was hard to mispronounce. Next, we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang or Kong. Kang? Ugh. The Poppy War. I think this is actually a really good title because poppy, while it sounds like it's talking about a certain type of seed that can be used for a certain type of recreation, and that's what it is in the book, it has a fun element to it. Poppy, popping, balloons, and then war. So it's like flowers, the poppy flower, and then war. And so I think that flower war kind of meld is very cool. I've read like 3/4 of this book, so I didn't finish this one, but I do think the title is actually really good. I think I can't remember the name of the full series, but yeah, The Poppy War. We are going to give this an A. And then we have Redwall by Brian Jacques. Brian Jacques. Redwall, the book one of the series, Redwall series. I recently looked to see, I've read like 19 of 22 or something of the series. And all 19 were read when I was a young boy, a young man. So a while ago. But Redwall, I think it's very simple. It's the first book. I have it on my shelf. This is kind of a cool title as well. I love the series. Redwall. It's you read the back and it's about Redwall Abbey. So right away you know what the book is or why the title is titled that. So it's very simple in that sense. It's again, it's got that two things pushed together to make a word. I like it. I don't think it's anything magical or that fantastic. Redwall. Yeah, it's probably C. It's C. It's middle grade. And then we have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So this is again the first of the series. I like this title. I think the alliteration is nice in Sorcerer's Stone. I do think Philosopher's Stone is cooler. The UK version, the original written version that J.K. Rowling wrote. But if we're going American, as I am here in America, we're gonna go Sorcerer's Stone. I think it's good. I don't think it's that exciting or crazy. It kind of tells you the MacGuffin that they're looking for, and that's the same convention for all of them. Deathly Hallows, Goblet of Fire, Prisoner of Azkaban, on and on through all 7 books. But it's unique in how big it was, and so it's anytime you copy it, it seems like a copy. So that's where you get your Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Well, it sounds like you're saying Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And I know that the title of those is The Lightning Thief. And then it's a part of that Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. But I don't know if people really see it that way because it seems like a copy. So this, I think, is decent to fine. We're going to stick it in C. And then we've got The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So this is another Brando Sando. I remember how much I did not like The Final Empire as much as I love Mistborn, the title. Way of Kings, I think, is really good. I think it's interesting because I have these two next to each other: Way of Shadows, Way of Kings. Way of Kings, I think, is really good because it seems regal. It seems epic fantasy, which is what it's trying to do. It seems high fantasy, and it's simple. The Way of Kings, the this of that. So it does that thing again. So it's not that unique, but I think it's really good. I will put it in A just because it's not as unique as possibly it could be. Then we have The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. So this one I think is kind of lame. And I think it's kind of lame because it sounds like it's trying to be cool. The Way of Shadows, it's about assassins. I mean, I love the series. I think I read the 3 books, so I think there's like Night Angel, Nemesis, and maybe a couple other ones that are involved with this. I've not read those yet, but the first 3, the trilogy, Night Angel trilogy, I loved them. I thought they were very, very good. A lot of fun to read. But the title itself, I think, it's forgettable. It's not that good. I think it's D tier. I think it's worse than these ones because these at least have something unique about them. Way of Shadows is just not. It's just not very cool. Wizard of Earthsea. I think this one is fantastic, and it's a good book. I've read the book. I read it in 2016, so like 8 years ago. It's not that long of a book. It's a good read. Ursula K. Le Guin, a very big name in fantasy. Wizard of Earthsea. So it tells you it's magic. Earthsea sounds really cool. Obviously, we know that it's about this giant place of archipelagos, all these little islands. So it's a mix of earth and sea. So in that sense, I think it's very fitting to what the story is. I think it's a great title. Earthsea. It's new. It's we haven't heard that word before. It's a meld of 2 words, and yeah, I think it's really good. I honestly think it is up there. Finally, we have Terry Goodkind's Wizard's First Rule. I have not read this book. I've heard that it's not good. And obviously there's going to be people who like it. So by saying that, I guess I've heard that it's good as well. But I've heard that it's not that great. I don't think it has a very high rating on Goodreads. But it's Terry Good. It's a classic. It's famous, I guess. It's on this list. Wizard's First Rule. It has something evocative about it. It's asking a question. What is the wizard's first rule? Who is the wizard? Is it the wizards plural? What are the rules? Is this a hard magic system, or are they just bound to a set of like guidelines that is above something else? Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I honestly think it's Wizard's First Rule. I think it's B tier. And I know that the book itself might be below B tier, but that's what I think. So, yeah, I think that is the order of things. I could adjust this a little bit. This is probably the weakest of the S tiers. Yeah, that's actually probably pretty accurate. A tier. Blade itself is probably not as good. Game of Thrones is probably not as good. Poppy War is probably the best. Maybe this, maybe something like that. B tier. Beowulf. Beowulf is maybe higher up, honestly, than it is, but I guess it's not really. It's just a guy's name. Fourth Wing is probably better. This is probably better. Something like that. C. Black Prism is actually a little bit cool. Harry Potter. Oh, we want that. Oh no, we want that like that. Redwall. We'll go right there. And yeah, that's probably fair. Man, I guess we'll do that like that. And then I think this one is the worst. So that's my list. That's my order of things. 25 fantasy novels. We'll probably try to do a science fiction list in the future, and maybe we'll do a list of books that I have not read at all. And so we'll judge the book based on the title to see if it sounds like a cool book. Because that's kind of what I was doing here, but I did have some foreknowledge because the fantasy space is mostly where I'm at. So, what did you think? Agree to disagree? Thanks for watching.